let me ask you, let me preference my next question, Ms. Hillman, by saying that I have the utmost regard for your lifetime of history in protecting people's voting rights throughout this country. That's why the next question is rather troubling for me. As you know, the New York Times and other newspapers have reported on EAC efforts to alter the findings of a report solicited by the Commission concerning the incidence of voter fraud. In fact, the New York Times editorial on Sunday, April the 15th, points out that only 86 people were convicted of voter fraud since the Department of Justice began placing significant resources into investigating voter fraud more than 5 years ago. While I recognize that you are only one member of the board, I think hearing your perspective and insight on how the EAC made these decisions would be helpful to us as an oversight body. The original draft report findings said that among experts, quote, there is widespread but not unanimous agreement that there is little polling place fraud, end of quote, while the final version stated that there is a great deal of debate on the pervasiveness of fraud. Why were the original findings altered?
Thank you for the question. And before I answer, let me just say that I have provided each member of the committee with a copy of a statement that I issued yesterday on this issue. To put it in context, Mr. Chairman, the EAC commissioned 2 individuals to work as special government employees to conduct research for us, and we asked them to help define voter fraud and voter intimidation so that in a future study everyone would know what we were studying. And secondly, to compile research that would inform EAC on a future study and to make recommendations from that research. We did not have the time or the money to commission the kind of study that would have allowed conclusions to be presented. The consultants did provide a summary of conclusions. Quite frankly, what would have been helpful if that summary had said, based on an interview with this person, it is documented that there are concerns about intimidation of minority voters in a particular state, and we think that's an issue the EAC should look into. Or several of the people interviewed believe the following to be true, and we think the EAC should study that. And so some of the conclusions they presented, which were based on interviews with people, did not have data to support the conclusion. And as much as I would like to sit here and say today that there is conclusionary evidence with respect to fraud and voter intimidation, that particular report does not provide us with that data.
Well, were there anomalies or flawed research methods identified? Or?
The research, the conclusions that you are referring to were based on interviews with people. In addition to those interviews, researchers compiled several hundred court cases. They did extensive review of news clips and other articles. The conclusions were not tied to those clips and articles. And so at the time that EAC adopted its report in December, what I believed we were saying was, this is information that helps us define what we will study and flags for us the issues we need to look into. And I do not believe that the EAC could have reached agreement on the conclusions that were offered by the researchers without being able to validate those conclusions.
Okay.
And so, as a result of the very serious allegations that have been made, EAC has asked its Inspector General to look into this matter on both the voter fraud and intimidation study as well as the voter ID study, so that Congress and the public and the commissioners can know what the circumstances were.
And I really find all of that peculiar, that you all are going to do an internal investigation about the actions that the commission voted on. And, you know, the commission authorized a study by Rutgers University, then rejected its findings on voter ID law, citing flawed methodology. Perhaps there's something wrong in the process there as far as how you go out and get these studies?
That would be a fair observation. With respect to the Rutgers study, I know that some of my colleagues believe that the methodology was flawed. I personally do not believe I could pass judgment on the methodology used by Rutgers. What I know is Rutgers didn't give me comparative data. For example, I'll just use your state. Now, I'm making this up. If Missouri had implemented new voter identification requirements in 2002, and there was an analysis of what those requirements were and turnout in 2004, it doesn't tell me if those requirements alone contributed to a rise or fall in voter participation unless I can look at it compared to 2000. So.
Okay, but I'm not going to prolong this much further, but you know what the effects are.
I absolutely do, sir.
The intimidating effects of voter ID law. I mean, it takes us back to Reconstruction. It takes us back to figuring out how many jelly beans are in the jar, a literacy test. And that's the impact of voter ID laws. And I'm just surprised at the actions of the EAC when they are here to protect America's voter. I'll recognize